Hi, everyone that's joining in right now. We just opened the webinar. Give people a few minutes to join us today. I see it's already flowing in, but let's give people a couple of minutes and then we'll get started with this webinar. All right, we already have a large group of people, so we're just going to get started. We're recording this webinar, so people that do not have the chance to join, they will be able to watch it later. Hope everybody is doing all right. We're in Singapore. We're here with Aditya today. I will introduce him shortly. Today we want to talk about deep tech in Southeast Asia, as we've already introduced to everyone, with the perspective of investors. So we hope that's going to be interesting. We'll have a poll running on the side. Feel free to vote. Some questions will be coming in. And also, if you have any other questions at any time, feel free to use the Q&A function, and then we'll address those questions. All right, let's get started. I will introduce Aditya. We'll give you a brief update on HH and what we're doing. Then we'll start the discussion with Aditya. We'll end with an official Q&A. But then again, if you have any question during the presentation, feel free to ask. And then we'll wrap it up. We'll try to keep it under 1 hour as always. Try to keep it interesting. Don't want to take too much time of people. All right, let's introduce the guest of this month. Today we have Aditya with us. Aditya is the founder and managing director of Elevate VC. Elevate is an early stage deep tech VC fund. It focuses on verticals, including smart vehicles, medtech, and complex computing. Aditya is a veteran in the deep tech. He's been in the space for over 20 years. Worked in the US, also worked in China. Prior to Elevate, he helped to grow a $2 billion tech companies. These companies were both acquired. I know that from there he kind of decided to jump into VC space. We spoke before. This is his passion. He likes to support founders, and he loves the deep tech space. And he's been making some interesting investments over the past couple of years. So we really like to follow him and see what he's doing. Welcome, Aditya. Maybe just a note from yourself. What are you working on these months?
Hey, Maarten. Thanks for having me on this chat. I think you pointed it out correctly. We're looking at 3 core verticals. In these last couple of months, we've been very, very focused on both digital therapeutics as well as some of the novel materials that go into everything from automotives to medtech applications as well. So it's been an interesting and exciting last few months.
Okay, awesome. Let's talk a bit more about the space and what you're seeing in a second. We're all very excited. Let HH, a real quick note on HH and what we're doing for people that are new to the webinar. We're a venture capital arm of the single family office. Obviously, we're based here in Singapore. We are also entrepreneurs. We've been successfely and sometimes unsuccessfully build and build out companies across different regions and industries. And we're here to support founders. We like to support founders that have a big vision, that solve meaningful problems. We love Southeast Asia. We're obviously based here. But we look beyond Southeast Asia, but this is our home, this is our core. Some of the companies we invest in companies all the way from pre-series A to Series D. Aditya is focused on a specific industry, which I think is quite smart of him. For us, the family, we're still a bit broader. We look at different opportunities, but in the end of the day, we look for founders that we think can build successful businesses. We've been doing this for a couple of years, invested in around 10, I think 11, 12 companies by now, and we've seen some good growth, some good traction. And we're always actively investing, and we invite founders and other investors to join us. Some of the companies that we've done, Stemly is interesting because Stemly is actually a company we did together with Elevate. That's to say, Elevate was actually the lead in that deal, but we got the chance to co-invest with them. We're very excited about that company. If we have some time, we'll talk about them. The deal has been shared with a lot of the people in this webinar, so people know about Stemly. As you can see, there's a range of other companies here. Not all of them are deep tech, but Stemly is maybe the most relevant company to this discussion today. We're on Crunchbase, as you can see in the link. So if you're interested in seeing our whole portfolio, you can check it out right there. And the same goes for Aditya's website. I just want to make sure that everyone has that. So that's elevate.vc. So check out his website as well and see what these guys are working on, because it's super exciting. Okay, let's get started. This is us, as if you've seen by now. What are we going to talk about today? We are going to talk about. Let me just make an introduction here. So what we see is a trend in the Southeast Asian markets, and that trend is really towards deep tech. We'll talk about why that's happening, but it is happening. If you look back at the past sort of 5 to 10 years, there was this whole trend of consumer companies, companies like Grab, Uber, and even in the e-commerce space, a lot has been happening. But the past couple of years, it's going really, there's a lot of deep tech opportunities in the market, and the interest of my investors is also rising. More and more funds are being launched. Elevate, one of them, launched a few years ago, really focusing on these complex solutions, deep technology solutions. And so we felt that it was really time to sort of like look at this space a bit more in detail. And then the two questions that we kind of hope to answer today for everyone in this webinar is really like, what does it take to invest in deep tech, right? Why is this so interesting? And what does it take to get successful in it? And what should investors kind of look for? Whether you are an angel investor or you're an institutional investor, maybe investing through a fund, you kind of want to look at the space in the same manner and try to understand, the sort of characteristics of the industry. Before we jump into the more detailed question, Aditya, I have one question for you, just to clear up for everyone here. What is the definition of deep tech, in your opinion?
So for us, deep tech is basically a technology that has very clear IP, that has a very clear engineering or scientific breakthrough with an intractable moat that keeps it apart from any of its other competitors. And the second thing we look for in a deep tech company is it has the potential to really impact millions, if not billions, of lives across the world.
Right. Can you give us an example of of a company? You can keep it confidential if you want. You don't have to mention the names, but can you give an example of a company that you feel is a characteristic deep tech company that you've looked at or that you're currently looking at, just to make it a bit more alive for people?
Sure, Maarten. It's a tough one to pick because I feel like across our portfolio we've got some very, very interesting companies that solve very difficult problems that no one's been able to solve before. If I were to just pick one, and this isn't because I prefer them to any of our other companies, but
right. Disclaimer.
Yeah. I think a good way to look at it is which companies are actually trying to solve or can actually frame hard questions that need to be solved for the world. One such company for us is a company called Preact. And Preact's whole mission, and their question is, how do we prevent serious car injuries and fatalities caused by road accidents across the world. It's one of the leading causes of deaths and or serious injuries today. And how do you stop it? How do you prevent it? And how do you prevent it as cars get more autonomous as well? So it's a pretty interesting technology. It came out of defense technology for projectile missile defense. And we're applying it now to vehicle safety. So 250 milliseconds before a crash actually occurs.
Right.
There are completely new ways of addressing safety and providing safety systems that no one could have done before this technology arrived. Another example is some of the companies we look at in diagnostics or predictive health, where they look at one of our more recent investments was into a company called Mesh Bio, and what they try and do is create basically they try and analyze to see and provide you a predictive diagnosis for chronic health, especially for the aged. And as you know, all populations are growing older and older, so they've got a very unique system to try and help with healthcare management for aging populations using predictive analytics.
And just a personal question that is always on my mind when I speak to deep tech investors is like, finding a company, understanding a company in the non-deep tech space is already very difficult. When I look at companies, sometimes they're not even that complicated from a technical perspective, but it's hard to analyze them if you're not from the industry. As an investor, how do you crack that problem in deep tech? I mean, you're talking about on the one hand you're in automotive here, then on the other hand you might be in industries like biotech or healthcare that are completely different. As an investor, how do you analyze both successfully? How do you make sense of it, given the fact that you're personally not have been from all these industries?
Actually, that's to me that's the important bit. I have been in these industries, right, on the operational side. So I think a very important thesis in our investments are only invest in things you understand. So right. For example, I don't understand Dogecoin. I don't have any Dogecoin in my portfolio, right. Even from a personal front. So for me, there are a few key verticals that I understand well. I understand how to sell into those verticals. I understand the key players. I understand the sales cycles. I understand the pricing strategies. And these are things that I think I can help our portfolio companies with. So right. I'm very specific. In the last two companies I was with, one was semiconductors, so hardware, and the second one was IoT connectivity, which was a software as a service play and throughout communications. But in both those companies, from a hardware and software perspective, we worked with telecommunications companies. We worked with the biggest data center providers. We worked with every single automotive company from Tesla to Toyota, again, across both hardware and software. We worked with all the big medical device companies. And so those are areas that I know and understand, and therefore we invest in. Right. And there are other folks that are exceptional at crypto or plant-based foods, and I think those are the experts to go to for such investments. So to answer your question, I think we are very clear about what we're good at, where we can add value to potential investee companies, and companies that we think we can really evaluate better than most.
Awesome. So just to summarize, and even deep tech is still really an umbrella term. Nobody is an expert in deep tech. It's really about these sort of individual industries and whether the investment team has experience in those. And given that you have that in those industries, that gives you a head start there to make those investments. Mm-hmm. All right. I got some answers from the poll here. Have you ever invested in deep tech startups in Southeast Asia? The majority says no, but still looking for the next unicorn. So a lot of interest, but at the same time, maybe some hesitation from people here, maybe to get into the space, of they haven't really seen that next opportunity yet. So let's talk about that for a second. Let's go to the next space. And I want to kind of rephrase the first question a little bit here, because there's a very broad answer you can give to this question, but maybe I'll rephrase it a little bit. What do you currently see, if you have to give a few opportunities outside your portfolio, as problems that are ideal for deep tech, that something that stands out currently that investors should maybe look for, or maybe an opportunity that you're actually looking for but you haven't found it yet?
Well, that's a tough question, Maarten.
I'm sorry,
but no, it's good. It's good. I say it's tough, but it makes me think as well. And I think those are the best sorts of questions. We've taken a very clear approach that we think the biggest problems of our time are going to be universal accessibility to medicine or diagnostics. They're going to be, what do we do with the massive problems we have with transportation and congestion and logistics? They're going to be, how do we take all this, we're producing more data per minute now than we used to 20 years ago. How do we manage that in a smart, effective manner that actually benefits all of humankind? We want to look at new kinds of technologies for materials or manufacturing, because we think that will bring additional job opportunities and economic opportunities across the world, especially to developing nations as well. So for us, those are the sorts of questions we like to ask. Those are the sorts of questions we like the companies that we invest in to try and answer for us. Right. And if they have a compelling thesis, then with which actually, and in each of these cases, it impacts millions, if not billions, of people. Those are the sorts of companies we would like to partner with and and try and support.
Just on your own strategy, when you source for deals, do you have an inbound network? Do you have people that refer you deals, or are you actively sort of saying, hey, we have this thesis, let's find a company that sort of we think can solve this problem? Like what works best for Elevate?
There are a few things. So for sure, we do have a very strong network. Part of it comes from the operational experience that not just me but my team comes with as well. So we do get referred deals from folks that we've worked with in the past, whether they were customers of mine, for example, or R&D folks that have worked with some of my colleagues. So we do get very strong inbound opportunities in our 4 core verticals, because that's what we know best, and those are the industries we've worked in. So that is a very solid source of deal flow for us. But also, I think there's a growing number of very talented groups and researchers within some of the IHLs, that's the Institutes of Higher Learning within Singapore. I think you're starting to see some very interesting folks coming out of, or second generation folks coming out of existing technology companies in Singapore. And those are some of the sources of deals that we are starting to see.
Right. Do you feel that, you being, go ahead, yeah.
Sorry, and I shouldn't neglect, I think there's a growing, and still nascent, but a growing group of incubators and accelerators in Singapore that are focused on deep tech, that are also starting to provide us some, excellent deals.
Right. Fantastic. I mean, Singapore obviously is pushing very hard to become like a deep tech haven. We'll talk a bit about that in a second. You having a global expertise in this space, do you feel that the deep tech solutions that come out of this region have regional focus? Are they different from what you see, for example, in the US or in Europe? Like, or is it sort of, is it a global trend? What do you see here specifically?
So I think Singapore, led by the government, has been very pragmatic at what it wants to focus on in the verticals within deep tech, and they typically have clear benefits to Singapore and the region. So that goes without saying. I think everything from Industry 5.0 to some of the medtech solutions to being self-sustainable with food are very clear objectives for Singapore, and for Singapore being a hub both regionally as well as globally. So I think those are those very natural. Those verticals come in quite naturally. But I think the beauty of technology today is you don't have to be a regional play. You can be a global play, and it doesn't matter where you're based. And I think Singapore is probably one of the best connected places to kick off from. You do have the two giants of America and China, which I think are producing some exceptional companies, and they do have access to some of the biggest enterprises to work with as well. But apart from those two giants, if you will, I think Singapore is up there as one of the deep tech hubs.
Right. When you look at
a global play.
Right. They're definitely at the table of the big boys in that sense. But you being a Southeast Asia-based investor, do you look at other countries to source deals, to find deals, or you're mainly like let's find the talent in Singapore, build the companies, and try to if we can sort of grow out of this region? Or do you look at other markets like Vietnam or Indonesia and say, hey, there's opportunities there as well?
There's opportunities all over the world, Maarten. I think Singapore, one of the reasons it's our base is because we think that we think that there's a lot of deep tech companies coming out of Singapore, and that's one of the reasons it is our focus. So I would say at least 70% of the companies we invest in are likely to be out of Singapore.
Okay, interesting. Just on a side note, we organized this webinar. We talked to different investors, different industries, and deep tech seems to be really an industry for investors to say, hey, maybe primarily let's have a look at Singapore, because that's where you can find those opportunities. Versus sometimes we talk about e-commerce and maybe transportation or such companies, and then actually we talk a lot about other markets in the region as well as potential markets. But this is an interesting learning point that really Singapore seems to be the entry point for deep tech when it comes to Southeast Asia. Earlier you mentioned already a little bit like Singapore is really trying to push for for deep tech, try to be at the table of deep tech in the world. How are they doing that, and how can investors benefit from the government here?
Like I said, I think the Singapore government's being very pragmatic. You've got if you were to look at the two big giants that we talked about, both the US as well as China, you've got they've been investing huge amounts into core science and technology for years now. China a bit more recently, but the US has been doing it for a century. So I think it's or close to a century, straight after World War I. So I think you've got you've got templates that you can look at. Singapore, up until 2020, has invested over $60 billion into the hard sciences, as the government has, and they've earmarked another $25 billion over the next 5 years for investments into core technologies. So it's definitely a situation where these technologies are starting to bubble out out of Singapore, out of some of the core areas that Singapore has developed as well, and that's aside from corporate spending. I think corporate spending, the last number that I saw was probably from 2018. I might need to check those the dates again, but corporates are spending totally about $5.8 billion in Singapore on corporate R&D. So, you can see that there's a lot happening out of the region in terms of development of technology and talent. Last count in 2017, there were about 35,000 researchers. I wouldn't be surprised if that number has doubled in these last few years. So you're starting to see, a good number of technologists out of Singapore. The deep tech scene in Singapore, I'd say, especially from an early stage perspective, has just started coming out in the last 3 years or so. So it's still fairly nascent. I know there's a lot of hype about it right now, but it's still very nascent. And there's many things that can be done, but I think the government is looking at it very pragmatically. They're picking strategic verticals. They're investing the right amount of money in it. They're attracting the right technology companies to Singapore. They're setting up a very technology-friendly regulatory framework, and they're setting up very good networks like GeoWorks, like areas where autonomous vehicles can drive around and have a test platform in a living, working city. So those are some of the things that I think Singapore is doing extremely well to attract deep tech companies.
Awesome.
And your second question, Maarten, I think was how can investors
how can investors benefit? But you know what? Maybe let me just rephrase that a little bit. Aditya, have you been, because it slipped my mind here, but have you been active as an angel investor as well before you started your VC fund, or you've always been in your VC? Right. Okay. Because I know in this group that's attending this webinar, there's a group of angel investors as well. They're always trying to, learn how to get access to deals and how to invest. But maybe because I just ran a poll and I asked people like, would investors shy away from deep tech investment opportunities? And so the majority actually says that, it's actually quite difficult to understand and to analyze these startups. I was just wondering if you, when you started as an angel investor, do you have tips for people that you say, hey, this is how you could approach it, or this is how I've done it when you just got started?
So maybe the two key things that I took away from being an angel investor out of Singapore, and again I was in pretty much deep tech only, was number one, deep tech does have a longer gestation cycle. So if you're looking for returns in 6 months or 2 years, deep tech's probably not the place to invest in. There are other areas, you mentioned logistics, e-commerce, those are likely to have outcomes, both positive and negative, much quicker than real deep tech plays. The second thing that I would suggest, and maybe this is a recurring theme through everything I say, is invest in industries that you understand well. Especially in a deep technology play, because you rightly pointed out, Maarten, there's so much going on. How do you really differentiate between different deep tech companies, or even start to understand what's happening in an industry that you don't fully grasp? So I was very careful about the sorts of companies and the sorts of verticals and industries that I invested in. One of the better known examples in Singapore is Circles.life, which is the fourth telco over here. And I was one of their earliest investors as an angel. And the reason I felt comfortable investing in them is because I understood the technology that they were trying to build, and how they were building into the core networks of M1 at the time. And this is all public knowledge, but it made sense to me, and I could make a judgment call based on that. And so that's my 2 cents. Invest in verticals and industries that and understand, and ideally understand the technology behind it as well.
Right. And then when you pick those opportunities as an angel, you'd invest in companies that were completely pre-revenue. Like how early did you go when looking at those opportunities, or were you like, I need to see some validation first before I believe this? Because just to add on that, this is obviously one of the big differences when investors look at opportunities where your typical non-deep tech you can validate traction, right? Much easier. You might have user growth, where with deep tech, you might still be in the development phase, just trying to get your patent out. There might not be any customers. Maybe you'll have an LOI signed, but that's about it, right? And so it can make you slightly uncomfortable to say, is this technology going to work or not?
Yeah, and I think, Maarten, that's a great question, and I think that's an area that every investor, I think, needs to search their own souls. So do you go for private? Do you go for public? If you go for private, what stage? For better or for worse, my risk appetite and that the proportionate risk reward as well is seed to pre-series A. Whereas for others, they like to see a bit more revenue, and so a Series B investment might make more sense for their risk appetite, for their investment profile or portfolio, or maybe even a pre-IPO or a SPAC deal might make more sense. So I think it's not for me to tell any individual or any investor what makes sense for them from from their own investment portfolio approach. Right, but that's a decision you need to make.
But let's bring it back to the early stage. When I mean, we all know, or when we look at early stage, it's founder is very critical, right? There's little data, little revenue, as I said. So typically when we invest, it's 70-80% based on the founder. Mm-hmm. The challenge that we sometimes see with deep tech would be that you have a founder who's extremely technical, who might have a PhD, right, or at least the technical skills to get the product right, which obviously is essential, but might not have the business experience, or might be a first-time founder. How do you balance that when you're looking at teams, when you're trying to find that ideal team to run the business?
Maarten, I think that's the $1 million question, or maybe the $1 billion question, right? Is finding an exceptional team that matches both. And right. I think a great example of such a team, and maybe you want to share more about it, Maarten, is Giuseppe and Sanjay out at Stemly, which we co-invested in together.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Maybe that's like, it is a good example. I agree with you. So yeah, Stemly is solving supply chain demand forecasting. So effectively, they're trying to help businesses to better predict demand and basically being able to make decisions based on those analysis. And then you indeed run into a team who on one hand had this extremely brilliant knowledge on how to build this technology, which by itself would be very difficult to invest in, because how is he going to roll it out? How is this person going to sell this solution? And then indeed you had the counterpart also in the founding team in this case, who had maybe not the technical knowledge, but extreme deep knowledge of the market, worked in those companies, and was able even work with a competitor, I believe, and is able to sort of sell the product extremely well. And so from my experiences in those kind of startup, previously, I've only found companies that either have the technical knowledge but not the sales skills, or I found the founder who had the sales skills and could sell this product to me, but then when you started to dig deeper, there wasn't any product, right? There was no tech. And I agree with you that in that team there seems to be that match, and that's indeed very, very interesting. I hadn't seen it before yet.
Right.
So that's promising. It's a good example. It's a good example. But are all your investments, you have that kind of mix, or you sometimes you took a bit more risk on the technical skills, or a bit more on the sales, like, or you try to find that ideal balance always?
We like to try and find that balance. It might not be with two co-founders, might be with three, it might be with one founder and then a very strong management team with them. But those are, to us, it's important to have that skill mix within the management team.
Right. Okay. Just a bit more on the ecosystem. There's a bit of a funding gap in Singapore, or at least deep tech startups are really. I mean, it's hard to raise money for any startup, but deep tech is maybe even a little bit harder because there's just less money available for them. Any particular reason other than maybe it is difficult to analyze? Do you see some problems that might have to be solved in the sort of ecosystem?
So firstly, let me echo what you said, Maarten. I think there are good companies that are bubbling under, that are coming out of all sorts of areas, whether it's the IHLs, whether it's from incubators, whether it's from coming out of corporates, or even out of second generation tech companies out of the region. What we are seeing is that there's a good number, or a growing number, of excellent investors that like to invest in growth stage deep tech companies, where there are some revenues, and some of the risks have been defrayed a bit. Obviously, in the stage we like to play in, there are challenges, and the challenges are, how do you make sure that this company does find a good product market fit, that they do find the right pricing strategy, that they do find the right geographies and can execute in the right geographies, and how do they really grow? And those are areas that we think we can help some of the companies that we invest in, and that's why we like it. To your question about what are the gaps in the ecosystem, I think it's still a very nascent stage in Singapore. Again, I think we're being branded extremely well, but we've only been around for 3 or 4 years as a deep tech hub, or real deep tech companies coming out of Singapore. And there are always going to be gaps. I think around the world today, you have a real shortage of exceptional talent within technology fields. The other thing that scares a few investors away is, how long does it take to develop a technology? But I think, and we love angel investors. We want more angel investors to come in and invest in deep tech. And the one message that I would have is, the cycles of developing technology have sped up exponentially. You have so much more data, both at the edge as well as the ability to compute and process it. You have so many more ways of manufacturing, even new materials that we're developing every single day, and the whole cycle of developing, building, testing, and iterating a product has really shrunk. What used to take 20 years now takes 2 or 3. So to me, it's now's the time to invest. There's a lot happening. There's the time to market the time to productize has really sped up, and so we are quite excited in 2021 to be investing in deep tech companies, and we encourage all angel investors to look at it with an open mind as well.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we're also very excited about this, and we'd love to see more. Trying to answer some questions here. Do you see, from an ISG perspective, right? It's a buzzword these days, or sorry, ESG. It's really a buzzword. Do you see a particular role for deep tech when it comes to addressing ESG through your sustainability problems?
I personally don't see ESG as I know it's a buzzword today, but I think it's one of the most critical problems in our lifetimes, especially from a climate perspective, especially from a recyclable perspective, especially from a materials perspective. Deep tech to me solves the toughest problems in the world today, and I know I've mentioned that a few times. And there's no tougher problem today than the existential problem that we currently live in, which is climate change. I think the beauty of ESG and SDG, which is what the UN uses, the Sustainable Developmental Goals, really puts the right language in place for deep tech companies to go out and not just make an impact for investors to make a good financial return, but also to really help the world in general, and the billions of people that live below the poverty line. So to me, it's an important problem to solve. Now, where does deep tech fit in to this entire equation? I think if you go out and clean a beach, you will solve a problem, and it's important to have that as well. But if you really want to tackle climate change, by 2030, you've got to have those technologies that make a 20x leap, a 30x leap in what we're doing today, and that's where I think deep tech comes in, and that's one of the reasons we're very bullish on the impact that deep tech will have. In fact, I think BCG recently did a study on deep tech and ESG or SDG goals, and they found that 97% of all deep tech companies actually fit well into the goals that the UN has come up with. So we are quite pleased to have the language of SDGs and ESG to really help drive both our investment practice as well as the companies that we invest in.
That's you as a fund manager, right? Talking here. When you speak to your investors or the LP and that you have in your fund, do you see that people are specifically looking for ESG, for I guess we can call it maybe impact is another word that's being looked for? Are people? Is it still very much the financial returns that's driving them when they come to speak to you?
So for us, it's I would say predominantly most of our LPs so far have been looking for financial returns. But I think part of the reason that they haven't looked for impact returns is because they didn't have the language to really discuss it. I think Europe has probably taken the lead on looking at fund managers where impact was an important piece. I think the US is coming around. Perhaps we lag a bit behind in that, but I think we're quickly catching up. I think the smarter, or anyone who lives on planet Earth needs to figure out how we improve the planet for ourselves and for our kids. And I think that's while the discussion continues to be very financial driven, and we are a fund that's driven by financial returns, I think we'd be remiss to not address sustainability concerns.
Yeah, my view on this is that a lot of people are willing to contribute to this, right? You're talking about wealthy or accredited investors here, people that have the resources to somehow make some kind of an impact. And my view is that a lot of people are kind of willing to, but it's like, how do I do this, right? Because one way we look at your typical nonprofit, let's just make impact through nonprofit, but maybe not all investors know that you can make that impact through a VC fund or make impact while generating profit, right? I mean, it's the best of both worlds in that sense.
I couldn't agree with you more, Maarten. I think that's the way forward.
Right. Okay. I think we're gonna wrap it up with that with that statement. Maybe I really want to thank you for joining today. I hope we create some value for the viewers here. I think we did. Again, thanks for your time. Thanks for sharing your thoughts. We'll continue to invest in early stage deals, but we invest in deep tech deals and we share them with people here, and hopefully we can also co-invest in other deals in the near future. But it's an exciting space, and I really want to thank you for helping out today.
Well, thanks for having me, Maarten, and everyone that's on the call.
All right, fantastic. Let's stay in touch, everyone, and have a fantastic day.